She was told to play a simple piano tune. Then she owned the entire stage with a stunning performance, a true story. The gymnasium at Lakeview Elementary smelled the way all school gymnasiums smell in December: floor wax, rubber soles, and somebody's leftover lunch that nobody had claimed. Folding chairs had been arranged in 7 uneven rows under 2 basketball hoops. The hoops still wore their white nets. A hand-painted banner stretched across the back wall. It read "Winter Music Celebration" in blue and silver paint, and whoever painted it had clearly run out of space toward the end, because celebration was noticeably squished, and the N at the finish was barely a letter anymore, more of a suggestion. Half the room was lit by those industrial fluorescent bulbs that hum in a frequency just low enough that you do not consciously register it, but just high enough that after 40 minutes your shoulders are tight and you want to go home and lie flat on the floor and stare at nothing until the feeling passes. 47 parents had come, 4 teachers, 1 principal named Mr. Okafor, who had the kind of patient face that suggested he had attended approximately 1,000 of these events and had made peace with each of them individually. Most of the parents had their phones out before they even sat down. This was not rudeness. It was the behavior of people who love their children completely and also have things to manage. You can do both. Most parents learn this quickly. The program had started at 6:30. By 7:10, it had been running 40 minutes, and the printed program sheet showed 3 more acts still to come after intermission. 3 clarinets had played "O Christmas Tree" in a way that was enthusiastic and sincere, if not always synchronized. A boy named Raymond had offered a trumpet solo that could most charitably be called a work in progress and most honestly be called evidence of courage over ability. A 6th grader named Tyler had played Jingle Bells on a recorder with the focused, fully committed expression of a man performing surgery on someone he cares about. All concentration, no lightness, every note its own small emergency. The parents had clapped for all of them with the particular warmth that belongs to parents at school events. Genuine love for the performing child, generalized affection for all the performing children, and mild exhaustion shared equally among everyone in the room. Maya Chen sat in the 3rd row, 4th chair from the left. She was 11 years old. She wore a maroon cardigan that her mother had pressed that morning using a travel iron borrowed from the guest in room 214 of the hotel, where her mother cleaned rooms 5 days a week, sometimes 6 when someone called in. The cardigan had a small loop of thread at the left cuff, where a button had been, a button that had gone missing 2 months ago and had not yet been replaced, because the thread was there and the sweater still stayed closed, and there were other things to spend 12 minutes on. Maya had noticed the thread on the bus ride to school. She had looped her thumb through it and held it there the whole way, not pulling, just holding. She adjusted her hairband once, then again, moved it a ½ centimeter to the left, which is an adjustment no one in the world could see the purpose of except Maya, who felt it and knew. 2 weeks before the recital, her music teacher, Mr. Vasquez, had found her after class. He had the gentle, apologetic energy of a person delivering news they know is slightly unfair, but have decided is necessary, and have mentally prepared a good reason for. He told Maya the program was running long this year. He said something careful about attention spans. He mentioned the younger siblings who came to these things, the toddlers, the kindergartners, and how they tended to need things to be wrapped up by the 45-minute mark, give or take. He asked, with genuine kindness, if Maya would be willing to play something a little shorter than what she had been practicing, something simple, something the whole audience could follow without too much effort. He suggested Für Elise. It runs 3 minutes, start to finish. Everyone knows it. Everyone can hum the first 8 bars. It is, in the language of school recitals, a safe choice. Maya said yes without hesitating. She did not practice Für Elise. What Maya had been practicing every evening for 3 months in the front room of the apartment on Orchard Street was the first movement of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. She practiced it on an upright Yamaha that was slightly out of tune and had one key, the D just above middle C, that stuck occasionally when pressed with too much force, catching in its housing before releasing with a soft click. She had learned to navigate the sticky D the way you learn to navigate any known difficulty in a familiar space, automatically, without having to think about it, with a small unconscious adjustment that had become part of the playing itself. Nobody had asked her to learn the Moonlight Sonata. It had not been assigned. It had not been suggested. She had heard it 3 months earlier, on a Tuesday evening in late September, when her father sat down at the piano in the front room and played the piece from beginning to end without once stopping, without once looking at his hands, without once checking whether anyone was watching. She had been coming from the kitchen with a dish towel in her hands, the kind you use to dry things, and she had stopped in the doorway. She had stood there and listened and watched his hands moving over the keys, and she had thought a very specific thought. I did not know he knew how to do that. She had not asked what the piece was. She had not said anything at all. 3 weeks later he was gone. He had not died. He had left. These are different things and they require different kinds of grieving, and at 11 years old, Maya did not yet have the full vocabulary for either of them. So she held the loss in the part of herself where things go when you do not yet have words for them, and she waited to see what it became. For 9 days after he left, Maya did not touch the piano. She walked past it. She looked at it sometimes. She ate breakfast across the room from it and did her homework in the same room as it and went to sleep knowing it was in the next room. But she did not sit down at it. On the 10th day she sat down, placed her hands on the keys, and started trying to reconstruct from memory the sound she had heard. Not from sheet music. She did not have the sheet music and did not look for it. From the shape of what she remembered, the particular motion of the triplets in the right hand, floating above a deeper, slower left. The place in the middle where the melody seemed to open up slightly, to stop holding back, to arrive somewhere. She was working from fragments, from the image of her father's hands, from the note that had stayed in the room after he finished and then faded, and from something in her own hands that seemed to already half know the way. It took her 2 weeks to find the shape of it, another 2 weeks to make it continuous, to stitch the sections together so they breathed as one thing instead of as parts. Another month to stop thinking about it and start feeling it. To play it the way her father had played it, not at the keys but through them, the hands doing the knowing so the mind could be somewhere else. She practiced with the soft pedal depressed on the evenings when her mother was home. Lynn came home tired most nights. She ate dinner, cleaned up, and went to sleep early, because the next shift started early. Some nights Maya could hear her through the wall, breathing in the slow and heavy way of someone who is not quite sleeping but cannot be said to be awake either. Maya would lie in her own bed and listen to the rhythm of it. In, out, the pause, in again, the way you count gaps between thunder and lightning when you are trying to figure out how far away something dangerous is. She kept practicing. She did not tell her mother what she was playing. It was not that she was hiding it. It was that she was not finished yet, and the things you are not finished with need to be kept close until they are ready to survive being seen. By the time Mr. Vasquez asked her to play something shorter, she had been working on the piece for 3 months. It was finished now, or as finished as she could make it. She had listened to a recording of it once, finally, after the 2nd month, on her school laptop with headphones in, and she had recognized the shape of it, recognized that she had found the right thing, and she had felt something she did not have a word for, and had kept going. Yes, she said, she'd play something shorter. She meant it and she didn't mean it. The way you can mean 2 things at once when you are 11 and have learned that the world often requires you to manage it. The gymnasium lights buzzed their low buzz. Mr. Vasquez stood at the microphone at the front of the room and introduced the next performer. He said, Maya Chen, age 11, 5th grade. He said she would be performing a short piano piece. He smiled. He believed what he was saying. He was a good teacher and a fair man, and he had no way of knowing what was about to happen, which is sometimes the precise condition required for something real to occur. Maya stood. She walked to the piano at the edge of the performance area. It was an upright Yamaha, not the same one as at home, but close enough that the dimensions of it were familiar. The height of the bench, the distance from the seat to the pedals, the particular weight of the keys before they give. She adjusted the bench, once, twice. A 3rd time so small a movement that it would have been invisible to anyone watching, a correction of millimeters that only mattered to her, and that she knew was necessary. She sat. She placed her hands in her lap. She looked at the keyboard the way you look at a door. You are not entirely certain you want to open, but that you have decided to open anyway, because you came all this way, and because there is someone waiting on the other side. Then she played the first interval, C-sharp minor, soft, 3 notes in the right hand beginning their slow rolling triplet above a low held bass note in the left. It is the kind of sound that does not announce itself. It does not knock. It is simply suddenly there, and once it is there, the room around it has changed without the room knowing how. Mr. Okafor, who had been checking the time, stopped checking the time. A woman in the second row, who had been working through a text message, set her phone face down on her knee without finishing it. The fluorescent lights were still buzzing. The banner still had its squished N and its barely there final letter. The gymnasium was the same gymnasium it had been 30 seconds ago. Nothing in it had changed in any visible way. And yet, by the 4th measure, the room had entered a different kind of quiet. Not the settled quiet of an audience that has remembered to pay attention, but the involuntary quiet of people who have forgotten to do anything else. The kind of quiet you cannot fake and cannot produce on purpose. It is the quiet that happens to a room, not the quiet a room decides to have. By the 8th measure, 3 parents in the back row had put their phones away. By the 12th, Mr. Vasquez, who was standing to the right of the performance area, had pressed his lips together in an expression that was doing 2 things at once: pride and something adjacent to guilt. Here is the thing about the Moonlight Sonata that people who know it know, and that people who have never really listened to it are about to understand. It does not build towards something in the ordinary way. Most music builds. It gathers. It rises. It releases. The Moonlight Sonata does something more patient, and in some ways more difficult. It accumulates weight, not through volume, not through tempo. It stays soft, it stays slow, but through persistence. It puts a stone on top of a stone on top of a stone, 1 per measure, so softly you do not feel each individual stone, and by the time you feel the weight of them, it is already considerable, and you do not know when it happened. Maya played it the way a person speaks when they have given up worrying about whether they are being followed. The triplets breathed. The tempo expanded slightly at the end of each phrase, the way a sentence loosens at its last word before it ends. She gave the rests a fraction more space than the notation strictly requires, and this did not read as error. It read as insistence, as the piece wanting something. She was not playing at the audience. She was not playing at the gymnasium or the folding chairs or the buzzing lights. She was playing at something no one in the room could see, and the room felt this without knowing what to call it. The sticky D above middle C did not give her any trouble. In the 3rd row, 4 chairs from the left, Lin Chen looked up from her phone. She had been composing a message to her sister in Guangzhou. A short message, a practical one, about a financial question and a form that needed to be filled out before the end of the calendar year. She had the very particular skill of someone who has learned to survive grief by keeping her hands occupied with manageable, necessary things. A form, a question, a small transfer of money. These things get done. The doing of them is itself a kind of holding on. She looked up because the sound moved through the room and reached her in a way that bypassed the part of her that was managing. She did not move. Lin Chen was 34 years old. She had come to this country when she was 23, with 2 bags and a husband and the particular form of hope that is not optimism but is its own thing, the decision to proceed. The decision to proceed is not the belief that things will be fine. It is the decision to keep going anyway, in the absence of that belief, because the alternative is to stop, and stopping is not something she had ever been able to do. She had cleaned hotel rooms for 6 years. She had learned English by watching television late at night after Maya was asleep, and by reading the backs of product containers in the grocery store, and by asking people to repeat themselves until she understood, which required a kind of daily courage that most people who speak a language from birth never need to develop. She had taught herself enough math to check Maya's homework, until Maya's homework reached a level that surpassed hers, which happened in 3rd grade, and she had felt something the day it happened, not quite sadness, not quite pride, a third thing that sat between them, and she had not told anyone. She had saved $40 a month from her wages for piano lessons. Not because she played piano or had any particular theory about piano, because she had grown up without things and she did not want Maya to grow up without things, and a skill is a different kind of thing from a possession. It goes with you when you go. It cannot be repossessed. It cannot be taken from the outside. She had regarded the $40 as a form of insurance, and had never examined this feeling too closely. She had not known, when she started saving, what she was insuring against. Now she sat in a folding chair in a gymnasium and listened to her daughter play the piece she had last heard on a Tuesday in September. And she knew. The left hand of the Moonlight Sonata reached into its lowest register. Measure 32. A C-sharp that is lower than all the other notes that have come before it, held under the continuing roll of the right-hand triplets. A note like something that has been underneath everything all along, and is now admitting it. Lin Chen gripped the armrest of her folding chair. She had heard this note once before, not at a recital, not on a recording. She had heard it in her own living room on a Tuesday evening in September, when her husband, James, her husband of 12 years, the man who had come with her on the plane with his 2 bags and his different kind of hope, sat at the piano and played this piece from beginning to end. She had been coming from the kitchen. She had the dish towel. She had stopped. She had watched him, and she had thought, I did not know, all these years, and I did not know this about him. And then, on the back edge of that thought, how many other things. She had not asked what the piece was called. There had seemed to be no good moment to ask, and then the moment passed, and then 3 weeks later it did not matter anymore. She did not know it was called the Moonlight Sonata. She did not know that Beethoven wrote it in 1801, while losing his hearing and trying not to tell anyone. She knew the note. She knew the exact place in the music where the note arrived. She knew it because her body had already filed it away, without asking her permission, in the way the body files away the things it needs to hold for you. 2 rows ahead, Maya's shoulders released, not dramatically, not visibly, to most people in the room. A small drop, maybe a centimeter, a measure after the low note. The release of tension that has been held long enough to stop being felt as tension. The way a breath goes out when you have been holding it without knowing you were holding it. Lin Chen saw it. She saw it from the 3rd row, 4th chair, in a gymnasium full of strangers, across the distance of 2 rows of folding chairs and 47 sets of other people's needs and attention. A mother always knows. The piece did not rush. It did not hurry toward its ending to give the audience the release of completion. It went the way honest things go, by their own logic, at their own pace, arriving when they are ready and not before. The last notes were very soft, the final chord barely there, and then it was done, and the room was back to being a gymnasium with buzzing lights and a banner with a squished N, except that the room was not entirely the same room it had been 6 minutes ago, because something had moved through it and left a residue. Maya sat, her hands in her lap, 4 seconds of silence, which sounds short but is not short, in a room full of people who have been holding their breath without knowing it. She did not fill the silence. She did not look up and give the audience the gift of a smile, which would have been easy and would have cost her something she did not want to spend. She sat with it, the way you sit with something that is complete but does not feel finished, because some things can be both at once. Then she stood and turned to face the room. Mr. Okafor rose first. He was on his feet before he had made a decision to be on his feet, which is the test of whether something real has happened. When the body responds before the mind has ratified the response, something real has happened. He began to clap, and then the woman with the phone was on her feet, and then the man in the vest, and then the back row all at once, and within 5 seconds everyone in the gymnasium was standing, not because this was the protocol or because someone had signaled that standing was appropriate, but because sitting would have felt like a lie about what they had just experienced. Tyler of the recorder dropped his instrument to the floor. He did not pick it up. He clapped with both hands free. The applause in a gymnasium bounces off concrete block walls and dropped ceiling tiles and doubles back on itself in a way that makes it louder than it has any right to be. This particular applause was all of that, plus something else. It was the applause of people who had arrived, expecting the ordinary, the loving, slightly chaotic ordinary of a school winter recital, and had received something for which they had not budgeted emotionally, and were now trying to express, through the only tool available to a group of strangers in a gymnasium, that they had registered it. Maya did not smile. She nodded once, a small, exact, deliberate movement that carried neither performance nor false modesty. It was the nod of someone who has said the thing they came to say and is acknowledging that it has been received, not thank you. Something more like, yes, this. Then she walked back to the third row and sat in the fourth chair from the left and looped her thumb through the thread at her left cuff and held it. Her mother did not look at her. Lin Chen was looking at the piano. The Yamaha sat at the edge of the performance area the way it had sat there before the program started. Unchanged, uncelebrated, slightly out of tune, one sticky key above middle C. Lin was looking at it the way you look at a letter after you have finished reading it. Not at the words, but at the fact of it. The object that carried the thing. The container that is now empty. Her jaw was set in the way she had learned to set it. 6 months of practice. The grocery store, the cereal aisle, the parking lot at the hotel on her afternoon break, standing at the window at the end of the corridor, looking at nothing. The school pickup line when a song came through the radio speakers that she recognized and did not want to recognize. The jaw, set. The breath, controlled. The hands, occupied with something practical. She was very good at it. She kept looking at the piano. The program continued. The fourth grade choir performed Frosty the Snowman with the full-throated sincerity that only fourth graders and very old people can bring to a familiar song. No irony, no self-consciousness, just the song, offered. They were slightly out of tune on the high notes, and this made it better, somehow. More true. A seventh grader played violin, a girl with her hair in a French braid, who had the specific courage of someone who knows they might crack under the pressure and chooses to play anyway, which is the only kind of courage that matters. She did not crack. She played through to the end, and the room gave her a warm, relieved applause that felt like a communal exhale. Maya sat through all of it. She watched the choir. She watched the violin. She clapped when the room clapped and not before. She was very still, the way a person is still when something important has just happened and they are being careful not to disturb the air around it. Mr. Vasquez found her after the program ended, near the folding table by the gymnasium entrance. Someone had set out a large bowl of fruit punch and a platter of cookies, the round ones with colored frosting, green and red and white, the kind of cookie that tastes precisely like you remember it from when you were 7, which is to say not particularly good, but capable of producing a very specific feeling of reassurance. He crouched down to her eye level. He did this without making a production of it, without the exaggerated crouch of adults who are performing the act of taking a child seriously. He just went to where she was. He was, in the quiet way that matters most, a good teacher. He said, in his careful voice, "I thought we had talked about something shorter." Maya picked up a green cookie. She said, "That was the shorter one." She took a bite. Mr. Vasquez looked at her for a moment, with an expression that was working through something. Then he straightened up. He looked across the room to where Lin Chen was standing near the entrance, still in her coat, her hands wrapped around a paper cup of punch she had been holding since it was given to her and had not drunk. She was looking at a middle distance that did not correspond to anything actually in the gymnasium. He looked at Maya. He looked at Lin. He did not say anything else. The gymnasium was doing its end-of-event thing, which has its own reliable choreography. Coats gathered from bleachers, smaller children located and retrieved, chairs scraped across the floor in ways that produced sounds nobody designed, but everyone knew. The toddler of someone in the back row had found a second wind and was now running circuits around the folding table. Tyler was explaining something at some length to a younger boy who appeared to be trying to keep up. Mr. Okafor was laughing at something. A real laugh, the kind that comes from the belly, not the courtesy kind, and it was a good sound in a room that had had a good evening. A woman Maya did not know stopped and said simply, "That was beautiful, honey." She had a silver scarf and the face of someone who had once played an instrument and still thought about it sometimes. A large man in a large coat said, "Great job, young lady," in the way adults say great job when they mean something more precise but cannot find it in the moment. Priya, from Maya's class, grabbed her arm and said, "Oh my God, can you teach me how to do that?" And Maya said no. Priya, who was a practical person, accepted this immediately. Maya finished her cookie. She drank a small cup of punch. She accepted a compliment from Mrs. Alvarez, who ran on an internal energy source that appeared to be renewable. Then she walked across the gymnasium, through the dispersing crowd, past the violin girl and her parents, past the spot where Tyler's recorder lay still on the floor, and she reached the place near the entrance where her mother was standing. Lynn had still not drunk her punch. They did not speak in the gymnasium. They gathered Maya's coat from where she had left it on the bleachers. They said goodbye to Mr. Vasquez, who was helping with the chairs, and he looked at Lynn when he said it, a specific look, and Lynn nodded back at him, and there was a sentence in that exchange that neither of them spoke aloud because it did not need to be spoken aloud. They went outside, December cold, the kind that has committed. The parking lot was lit orange-white from the pole lights, which make the world look slightly unreal at night, like a set for something. Parents moving to their cars, in the tired, satisfied way of obligation fulfilled. A minivan with its radio going. Someone's toddler in full rebellion about a hat. Maya and Lynn walked. They did not have a car. They lived 6 blocks from the school, which in warm months was pleasant, and in December was simply the route. Lynn put her hand around Maya's. Maya's hand was cold from the walk from the entrance. Lynn's was warmer. The first block passed in quiet. On the second, a dog behind a chain-link fence raised a formal objection to their existence. Maya looked at it as they passed. The dog continued objecting. They continued walking. The third block had the house with the Christmas lights, old-fashioned ones, large bulbs, the kind your grandmother had, red and green and blue strung along the roof line and down the porch railings like something from 30 years ago that refused to become obsolete. In the window, visible from the sidewalk, a tree, medium height, star on top, slightly leaning, lit from inside. Maya looked at the tree as they passed. Lynn looked at it too. They did not remark on it. On the fourth block, under the streetlight at the corner of Orchard and Fifth, Lynn's hand tightened around Maya's. It was not the ordinary pressure of a parent holding a child's hand. It was tighter than that. The grip of someone who is holding on to something they know is real, in a time when many things have stopped feeling real. The grip that comes from the body before the mind has had time to deliberate. Maya felt it. She gripped back. Not the grip of a child holding a parent's hand for safety. The grip of 2 people who are, each of them separately and together, trying to hold on to something that has already been changed by loss, trying to carry forward what remains. They walked. On the 5th block, Lynn steered her around a pothole she knew about. Just a small sideways pressure on Maya's hand, left and then straight, without explaining or pointing it out. Maya went where the pressure said to go. She did not ask why. The 6th block was their block. Their building was a 3-story walk-up with a buzzer that functioned only when it felt motivated to do so, and a front door that required a particular technique. A lift, applied at the same moment as the push. Lynn did the thing with the door without thinking about it. Maya watched her do it. She had watched her do it hundreds of times without seeing it, and now she saw it, the specific knowledge in her mother's hands, the knowledge that had accumulated from years of returning to the same door. There are so many things a person knows about a place they have lived in long enough. The 3rd step on the 2nd flight that is best avoided at night. The faucet handle in the kitchen that needs 2 full turns before it catches. The bathroom door that requires a pull toward you before it will lock. You learn these things so gradually that you stop knowing you know them. They become part of the body, part of the automatic, the way breathing is automatic. And then someone who also knew these things is absent, and you notice the knowledge differently. It is yours now in a way it was not before, because there is no longer someone else to share the knowing with. The knowledge is the same. What surrounds it has changed. They went up the stairs. Lynn unlocked the apartment. She turned on the lamp in the front room. She almost never used the overhead light, had never preferred it, and the lamp made a warm circle that reached about 2/3 of the way across the room before the corners went quiet and dark. The piano was against the wall. Neither of them had moved it. In the weeks after James left, There had been a few evenings when Lynn had stood in the doorway of the front room and looked at it with an expression Maya had not known how to read, an expression that contained more than one thing and perhaps too many things to sort through standing in a doorway. She had not moved it. The piano had stayed. Lynn hung her coat on the hook by the door. She went to the kitchen, the kettle, the burner clicking to life, the small, reliable sounds of someone doing a known thing in a known space. Maya sat down on the couch. She took off her shoes and set them side by side on the mat. She sat with her feet on the floor, her hands in her lap. The thread at her left cuff was still there, the small loop where the button had been. She put her thumb through it. From the kitchen her mother said, "You didn't tell me." Not a question, not an accusation. The statement of something noticed, offered plainly, the way Lynn tended to offer things that mattered. Maya said, "I know." A pause. The kettle beginning its slow work. Lynn said, "Where did you learn it?" Another pause from Maya. Not because she didn't know, because the answer to the question was the question. She said, "I just listened." A longer pause from the kitchen. The quality of it was different from the earlier ones. It was the pause of someone who has received something they were not braced for and is deciding very carefully how to hold it without breaking anything. The kettle came to temperature and clicked off. Lynn made tea, 2 cups, which she did not usually do on weeknights, which cost extra time in a morning that started early. She brought them out on the small bamboo tray that had come from her mother's kitchen a long time ago, and she set it on the coffee table and sat down next to Maya on the couch and handed her a cup, jasmine tea. Always jasmine. They sat with it, the lamp making its circle, the wind at the window edges, the building speaking its nighttime language of contractions and small adjustments, the language of things that have been still for a long time in one place. Maya held her cup in both hands. The heat came through. After a while, Lynn said, "The part in the middle." Maya said, "Measure 32." Lynn was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "It was different, hearing it in a room full of people." Maya looked at the surface of her tea. She almost said, "Different how?" But she did not say it, because she already knew how, and making Lynn put the how into words would have meant asking her to handle something fragile with her hands already full. Some things are better held the way Maya was holding the cup, close, two-handed, steady, letting the heat come through without trying to name the heat. Lynn said, "You practiced for a long time." Maya said, 3 months. Lynn said, "I didn't know." Maya said, "I know." This was simply true. Lynn had not known, because she came home tired, and Maya played with the soft pedal down on the evenings she was home, and on the evenings she was not home, Maya played the way she wanted to play, which is to say fully, with the sound opening up into the room. She had done this not to deceive, but because the thing was not ready yet to be heard. The way you keep something close until it has hardened enough to survive the open air, until you are sure of it, until you have finished making it what you meant it to be. It was finished now. Lynn set her cup down and leaned back into the cushions and looked at the ceiling. She breathed in and she breathed out, and Maya counted the pause between them, the old habit from lying in bed listening through the wall, measuring the distance of the storm. The storm was close. Lynn said he would have liked that. She said it in the voice she used for things she had been carrying for a while and had decided, now, to set down in the open. Level. Careful. The voice of a woman who is extremely skilled at not crying in rooms, who has been practicing this skill for 6 months with considerable dedication, and who is, at this moment, in the quietest possible way, right at the edge of what the skill can hold. Maya looked at the piano. She said, "I know." She had known it since September, since the Tuesday, since she stood in the kitchen doorway with the dish towel and watched his hands move and thought, "I did not know." She had known it every day of the 3 months she spent learning it. She had known it when she sat down at the piano in the gymnasium and adjusted the bench 3 times. She had known it the way the body knows things it has decided to carry. That was why she had done it. Not only why, but part of why. She had done it because she heard something important and she did not want to lose it. She had done it because some things get kept and some things don't, and she had decided that this particular thing, the shape of that Tuesday evening, the sound that had been in the room when her father played, the low note in measure 32 that had arrived like an admission. She had decided that this would be a thing that was kept. She did not say this to her mother. There was no need to. Lin Chen, who had been watching Maya for 11 years and had spent the last 6 of those months watching with the particular sharpened attention of a parent who knows her child is carrying something and is not yet certain whether to take it from her or let her carry it. Lin already knew. The tea cooled toward the end of warm. They kept drinking it. The wind worked at the window edges. A car moved down Orchard Street, then another. The ordinary late evening existence of a street that does not stop existing because you have had a hard year, because hard years do not pause the street, and the street does not owe you anything, and somehow this is also, in its way, a kind of company. Lin said, next year. Maya said, what about it? Lin said, the recital. Will you play again? Maya considered this. She thought about Mr. Vasquez and the program sheet. She thought about the folding chairs, and the buzzing lights, and Tyler's recorder on the floor, and Mr. Okafor on his feet, before he had decided to stand. She thought about her mother's hand at the corner of Orchard and Fifth, the grip of it, tighter than tight. She said, Mr. Vasquez is going to ask me to play something short again. Lin said, and pardon Maya, looked at the piano. She said, I'll tell him yes. Her mother looked at her. Maya said, and then I'll play whatever I want. Lin laughed. It was a short laugh and a real one, the kind that arrives sideways before you can decide whether to admit it. It had been a while since Maya had heard this laugh from her mother, the unprepared one, the one that didn't get there in time to be managed, and it sounded like something remembering what it felt like to be warm. Maya smiled. A small one, but genuinely there. Lin cleared the cups. Maya got ready for bed. Lin came to the doorway the way she did every night, one hand on the frame, the light from the lamp making her a silhouette. Good night. Good night. The lamp went out. The apartment settled into its nighttime. The pipes, the wind, the building doing its patient, slow work. Maya lay in the dark and thought about measure 32. She thought about her mother's grip at the street corner. She thought about the sticky D above middle C and how she had learned, over 3 months, to navigate around it with a small automatic adjustment that had become part of the playing itself. Not something she thought about, just something her hands knew to do. She thought about Tuesday in September, the dish towel, her father's hands, the note that filled the room and then faded. She thought, I kept it. That was it, in the end. That was what 3 months of practicing with the soft pedal down were for. What the gymnasium and the folding chairs and the standing ovation were for. Not for the applause, not for Mr. Vasquez's guilty pride, not for the woman with the silver scarf saying beautiful honey. For the keeping. She had heard something important and she had kept it. She had taken it inside her and learned the exact weight of it and the exact shape of it, and then she had carried it across 6 blocks and 2 flights of stairs and into a gymnasium on a Wednesday evening in December, and she had let it be heard. She did not know if that was enough. You can never know if it is enough. But it was the thing she had in her hands, and she had given it, and it had landed. She slept. Across the hall, Lin Chen sat on the edge of her bed without turning on the light. She sat in the dark and listened to the apartment, the pipes, the wind, Maya's breathing through the wall, slowing now toward sleep. She thought about the note, the low one, the one in measure 32, the one that had found her across 2 rows of folding chairs in a gymnasium full of strangers, that had reached through the distance and the months and the careful management of things and landed exactly where it was aimed. Her daughter had done that. Her 11-year-old daughter, who borrowed the travel iron from room 214, who had a thread at her cuff where a button used to be, who had spent 3 months practicing something in secret and then gotten up in front of 47 parents and an off-tune piano and given it away. Her daughter had done that. Lin set her jaw. She breathed in. She breathed out. She went to the window. Orchard Street was mostly quiet. 1 set of headlights moving south. Somewhere down the block, the Christmas lights of the corner house were still on. The old-fashioned bulbs, red and green, visible just at the edge of her window frame. She could see the glow of them without fully seeing the source. She stood at the window for a while, then she went to bed. In the morning, Lynn was up before Maya, the way she was most mornings. She made eggs. She made toast. She got out the little jar of chili oil that Maya liked, the one she bought at the shop on Maple that was a 20-minute walk and worth it. She set the table, 2 plates, 2 glasses, napkins folded into triangles the way her mother had taught her, the fold that lived in her hands without requiring any thought, a piece of knowledge passed down without ever being spoken as a lesson. Maya came out with her hair still in progress and her bag over one shoulder. She looked at the table. She sat down. They ate breakfast the way they ate breakfast, which is to say in the ordinary way that feels, after everything, like a kind of small miracle. The eggs, the chili oil, the question about the library book, the water bottle on the counter, the flat white December sky doing its slow deliberation about snow. Ordinary things, done the ordinary way, in the ordinary order. Maya put on her coat. She put on her bag. She picked up her water bottle from the counter. At the door she paused. She turned and looked at the piano. 2 seconds, maybe 3. The look of someone taking a careful inventory of something they intend to return to. Not goodbye. Something more like, I see you. I'll be back. Then she faced the door. Bye, Mom. Bye. Have a good day. The door opened. It closed. Maya's footsteps on the stairs, skipping the creaky one on the second flight, as she always did without thinking about it. Then quiet. Lynn cleared the plates. She washed the pan. She dried her hands on the dish towel hanging from the oven handle, the same towel, the one she always used. She stopped. She held it in her hands for a moment. The dish towel, just a dish towel, white, slightly worn at the edges, useful. She held it. Then she put it back on the handle and went to get her coat. She had a shift starting at 8. She had things to do. She did them. The next morning at school, Maya sat through math and reading and a social studies video about water cycles, and she did not think about any of it particularly. Her mind was doing the thing minds do the day after something has happened, moving around the edges of the event without going directly to it, the way you orbit something bright without looking at it straight on. At lunch, Priya sat across from her with a sandwich and a bag of chips and said, in the easy way of someone who had already processed the thing and was ready to talk about it, everyone is still talking about last night. Maya looked at her sandwich. Priya said, Tyler told his whole homeroom this morning. He said it was the best thing he'd ever heard at a school thing. Maya said, Tyler plays the recorder. Priya said, yeah. A pause. Priya opened her chips. She said, did you know you were going to do that? Like, did you plan to play that one instead of the one you were supposed to play? Maya considered this question with the attention it deserved. She said, I practiced it. Priya said, but Mr. Vasquez told you to play something else. Maya said, I know. Priya ate a chip. She seemed to be chewing on more than one thing. She said, does that feel weird? Maya thought about it. She said no, it did not feel weird. It felt like the only thing that made sense, which is a different feeling entirely, and one that Maya did not yet have the vocabulary to distinguish from not weird, but she knew it when she had it. You practiced the thing until it was ready, and then you played the thing you practiced. The fact that the two things were different things was a complication but not a contradiction. She had said yes to Mr. Vasquez's request honestly. She simply also had this other thing, this finished thing that had taken 3 months and needed somewhere to go. After school, Mr. Vasquez caught her in the hallway near the music room. He said, "Can I ask you something?" She stopped. He said, "The Moonlight Sonata. Do you know who wrote it?" She said, "Beethoven." He said, "Do you know anything about when he wrote it?" She said, "No." He said, "He wrote it while he was going deaf. He had started losing his hearing, and he did not want people to know. He wrote letters about it that were very hard to read, about the fear of it, about what music meant to him and what it would mean to lose it. And in the middle of all of that, he wrote this piece." Maya looked at him. He said, "I just thought you might want to know that." She did want to know that. She filed it in the place where she kept things that mattered, without yet knowing why they mattered, alongside other things in that same place. The thread at her cuff, the sticky D above middle C, the exact feel of the bench at the right height, the low note in measure 32, her mother's grip on the corner of Orchard and Fifth. She said, "Thank you, Mr. Vasquez." He said, "You're welcome, Maya." She went to her next class. The story spread the way things spread in a neighborhood that is small enough for things to travel. The parents who had been there told parents who had not been there, and the telling changed it slightly the way all telling changes things. A little larger, a little more dramatic, the details smoothed into the shape that stories want to take. By the weekend, someone had described it as the most extraordinary thing they'd ever seen at a school event, which was probably generous, but also probably contained a piece of truth wrapped in generosity, which is where a lot of truth lives. Lynn heard pieces of it from two different parents at the school pickup the day after the recital. A woman she did not know well came over and said her daughter plays piano too, and could she ask where Maya had studied? And Lynn said Mr. Vasquez, the school teacher, and the woman said he must be remarkable, and Lynn said he was good. Yes, a good teacher. She did not say that the 3 months of the specific piece had happened outside of any lesson, in the living room on Orchard Street, at night, with the soft pedal down. Some things belong to you, and you do not hand them to every open hand. The following Sunday, Lynn sat at the kitchen table after Maya had gone to do homework, and she looked at the door of the front room where the piano was. She sat with her coffee, and she looked at the door. She looked at it for a while. Then she got up and went to the piano and sat down on the bench. She had not played in years. She had taken lessons as a child, back home, for 4 years before her family could no longer afford them, and in those 4 years, she had learned enough to play simple things, scales, a few beginner pieces, the kind of playing that lives in the hands for a long time after the lessons have stopped, even if you never practice it. The hands remember. She put her hands on the keys. She played a C major scale, slowly, the way you do when you are reintroducing yourself to something you used to know, up and then down. The keys were familiar under her fingers, in the way of things that were learned young, not through thought but through the body, through repetition until the repetition was folded into something you simply were. She played it again. From her room, Maya heard it. The scale, played slowly, going up and coming back. She sat at her desk with her homework open in front of her, and she listened to her mother play one scale, and then another, and she did not move. She did not move for a long time. She just listened. That is how it went, after, slowly, in the way of things that move toward light in winter, not dramatically, not with any clear moment you could point to and say, that was when. Just gradually, incrementally, the way seasons move. Lynn playing her scales on Sunday mornings, Maya adding a third piece to her practice, a Chopin nocturne she had heard somewhere, she could not remember where, that lodged itself in her the way certain sounds lodge. The apartment on Orchard Street, with its creaky step and its sticky front door, and its piano against the wall, which had been a presence that needed to be managed and which became, over time, a thing that was simply there and was theirs. Some things become part of the structure, like the step you skip at night, like the door you know how to open, like the knowledge in your hands that you did not decide to keep but that stayed anyway. The recital had been a Wednesday. By the following Wednesday, life had resumed its shape on the outside. Lunch, homework, the water bottle on the counter, the bus, Lynn's early shift, Maya's walk to school in the cold. The ordinary machinery of a life continuing to move through time, because that is what lives do, because the alternative is to stop, and stopping is not something either of them had ever been built for. But something had been said. In a gymnasium with 47 parents and a hand-painted banner and an off-tune Yamaha, on a Wednesday evening in December, something that needed to be said had been said, not in words, in notes. In the particular low note at measure 32, which had traveled from a Tuesday in September through 3 months of soft pedal evenings and 1 school recital and across 2 rows of folding chairs to find the person it was aimed at, it had found her. That was enough. It was, in fact, exactly enough. End.